The interviewer is Christian Wright. Today is November 5th, 2020, and we're at the Hal McDowell building at Morehead State University. If you could please introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Greg Russell. I'm the Provost and Vice President of Academic Affairs here at Morehead State University.
And how long have you worked for the university, sir?
Yeah, this is my 17th year at Morehead State. I've been in higher ed for more than 30 years at a couple of different institutions, so 17th year back at MSU.
And do you live in town or in the surrounding area?
I live in Rowan County, not in Morehead proper, but in Rowan County, on the north end of Rowan County.
And now we'll go ahead and get into some COVID-oriented questions. When were you first made aware of COVID, and what did you think about it when you heard?
Yeah, so this is I'll try to be brief because this is an interesting story. I happen to be part of, you may be aware that there's a large greenhouse going on, being constructed, and actually will be operational in just a few weeks here in Rowan County, App Harvest. And App Harvest had contacted me about participating in a delegation that went to the Netherlands in February. And so we were in the Netherlands and started to hear more about COVID-19. I had heard a little bit about it before February, but more specifically, and where it really hit with me, Christian, was I was in Amsterdam getting ready to board the flight to come back to the United States, and I think it was near the end of the first week of February. And the flight attendants and those that were helping to onboard everyone to the plane were going around asking everyone, have you been to China in the last 2 weeks? And that was the extent of the safety protocols just before they packed us on this flight, early morning flight from Amsterdam, which had literally every seat filled, and the plane was to capacity. And so what I remember thinking was, what if someone is not honest about that question, number one, or number two, they've been in Wuhan before 2 weeks, outside of that 2 week window. And you know, as we've learned now, the 2 weeks can actually extend a bit longer into experiencing symptoms. So anyway, I remember very distinctly that early February flight from Amsterdam, where it really hit me in the face that COVID-19 was a real thing. And it's crazy that it happened in a foreign country. And then, of course, where it really became very real to the campus and to this area was early March, when we were beginning to discuss what are we going to do post-spring break. And then the rest, I guess, you know the story of, where essentially after spring break we moved fully online for the remainder of the spring term, and then made massive changes to various things on campus since.
Yes, sir. And that's actually really interesting. Definitely got a little bit of an earlier introduction to COVID than I think most of us at the university did. But when you came back, did that kind of influence how you started to handle COVID?
It certainly did. You know, at that point, what I really, probably like a lot of other people, I dug into it from looking online and grabbing as much information, some of it accurate, some of it not so accurate, information about what had been going on in China. I started, I bookmarked some specific web pages that became sort of my reporting mechanisms on what's going on in the U.S. At that time, I was very specifically focused on the U.S. because, as you recall early on, this started out in Washington State, and so I was watching the spread starting to happen and getting concerned through the month of February. And as I said, I was monitoring at that time. As I recall, Italy was a major issue, and some other European countries, but specifically Italy, was something that I was monitoring almost daily because I was concerned if this can happen there, although it's a different country from the U.S. We have a lot of elderly people in our country as well, And, and so what became apparent to me during that time was there was significant potential for this to come to Kentucky. And then, of course, my mind went immediately to, more specifically to Rowland County, but even more specifically to Morehead State University and the campus.
And when we all kind of, as you said, cut for spring break, and you guys were making that decision to if we should move online or if we should come back, was that something you had a part in?
Absolutely. I was part of the discussions essentially from the beginning of that, when we began having those conversations. My role is essentially working with a lot of great people, great colleagues, to kind of manage what happens with all of our courses, our students, and our faculty. So we certainly have Russ Mass, Vice President of Student Affairs, who manages a lot of the student-related issues, but you know, clearly what happens in the classroom is why most students are here. And so yes, I was in on the discussions very early. The initial discussions, the president, all the vice presidents were discussing the options, and frankly what happened was the university presidents were talking, and they were trying to decide, do we do this all together or do it separately as individual? And by that I mean the the public universities in the state of Kentucky. And so, as I recall, either UK or U of L kind of went out front and decided we're moving online, and then very quickly after that, the snowball effect happened to where every institution decided we needed to move fully online and get students, have students not return to campus. And we were so much in a learning curve phase there, trying to understand it at that point, that we wanted to err on the side of risk aversion. And so, so we decided, like the rest of the institutions in the state, this is the direction we needed to go. And I will tell you, it was at that point, as soon as we made that call, the entire conversation shifted to what are we going to do during the next academic year, because we had made the call for the spring semester. Most of our summer classes are online, so there was a very small percentage of cases we needed to discuss about the summer, and we spent much of the remainder of the semester, beginning in March, the spring semester, talking about fall semester and the next academic year.
And how did us moving to online instruction and getting these students out of the university affect your job?
Well, what it really did was we immediately moved into a mode of how can we provide the support to faculty that they need, and then, as importantly, how can we provide the support to students that they need. So our two primary concerns there were, on the faculty side, we had a number of faculty who had never taught online. They were very accustomed to using Blackboard for support, but not as the primary teaching tool. And so that was the first concern, is how do we set up essentially learning communities? How can we set up support groups of faculty that are more experienced with online instruction to help those that weren't? And I would say that we had good success there, but not the level of success we would like to have had, just because it happened so quickly. Literally, I still remember, Christian, the email that was sent out, or conversation we had with faculty from the president, provost, and others that said, hey, take spring break. So this went out like at the end of the week before spring break. Take spring break to convert your classes online. Instead of what you might normally do as a faculty member is kind of catch your breath a bit, but more importantly to kind of catch up on your gradings, etc., and make sure that you're ready to hit the ground running again post spring break. What spring break became was a massive training exercise and series of individual small group workshops to try to assist people. So it was all hands on deck kind of an approach, especially with our distance education and instructional design support group, which is a relatively small team on campus, which provide a lot of the training and support for faculty as they're offering online courses. That group went into, I won't say 24/7 mode, but it sure was something similar to that. But it was also a lot of faculty doing that. So that was on the faculty side. Then on the student side, we were concerned about internet access. Do we have a good, will they have a connection that's good enough? Do we have the appropriate infrastructure wherever they might be? And so we started moving into how can we provide the equivalent of hotspots. There was a lot of discussion with regional campuses about can they just come into your parking lots. Students using parking lots here, going to public libraries for hotspot access, McDonald's, all the scenarios that were possible. And so that was a primary concern. Then we developed a loaner program for students to check out laptops that had difficult circumstances. So it was very much sort of emergency room kind of, to use I guess a bit of a metaphor there, but it was just we moved into quick action, trying to respond as quickly as we could kind of situation.
And moving through the summer and into this semester, how did yourself and others make the decisions on what rules the university would have for reopening, and when did you guys know we would in fact be coming back in person?
So I would say we had, I'm not going to count how many, but I'll just say almost continuous meetings about the issue of the fall semester and about how we could operate in the fall semester, how we could deliver instruction in the fall semester. And so part of that was clearly, can we operate housing in a safe way? How do we provide, and I know this is outside of academic affairs, but it impacts students dramatically. How can we offer food services appropriately and safely? How can we deliver instruction in the classrooms safely with social distancing guidelines? How can we provide training to faculty on online instruction? And that's not even getting into all the issues about what happens if we have positive cases on campus, employees or students. And so, those discussions really were ongoing. I will tell you, it was starting in March. And then we talked quite a lot about how do we provide the appropriate infrastructure in the classrooms to be able to deliver instruction. So a lot of discussion about hybrid teaching, high flex teaching, whatever you want to call it, to where students may have part of their class delivered online, part of their class delivered in person. And what do we do in those periods where they're not in the classroom, and what kind of classroom technology can we put in play? And so that involves money, clearly, but more importantly, it involves time to appropriately implement and install that equipment. Identifying classrooms, it was a major undertaking to identify the capacities of our classrooms. We had to literally go into classrooms and move desks around with 6-foot social distancing guidelines and see this classroom before was seating 45, it now can seat 12. Those kinds of things. And then create essentially an all-new template of available classrooms. And so what the students clearly have seen this semester is that large classrooms have become very small classrooms. And so then we thought, okay, if we're going to be able to deliver on campus or in-person instruction, what do we do about classrooms that have, or classes that are going to have 30 students in them? And we literally had very limited classrooms on our campus that from a safety guideline standpoint, could seat as many as even 30 students, which we have a number of classes, especially lower division classes, that have 30, 35, 40 students in them, and some with more. And so we then moved to identifying spaces on our campus we had never thought to use for instruction, ADUC being one. The third floor of ADUC went from being a meeting space to a classroom space, from a ballroom to 3 classrooms, from button drill room being a space we would use for various functions, a very large space, meetings, events, to a classroom. Button auditorium being primarily for performances and speeches, etc., being converted into a classroom, and so on. The little theater in Ada being used for, so all those spaces that were, and kind of pulling back 3rd Street Eats building back into classroom use. So all of that required quite a lot of retrofitting and moving facilities management. That group was just amazing and continued to be through this entire process. And so just getting the classrooms retrofitted and ready for students was a major undertaking. Then the protocols we were going to use to appropriately sanitize spaces, the PPE, the various kinds of liquids we would need to be able to sanitize, and equipment we would need to be able to do that. And I hope students understand and realize that we are cleaning, sanitizing every classroom every day. We go in and clean every night. The facilities management crew comes in and sprays the classrooms and completely kills any possible germs every day, every classroom. And so just, if you think about, facilities always would provide custodial services that would allow us to be able to keep our spaces neat and clean. But it's a whole other level to sanitize them at the level needed for COVID-19. So that was a significant undertaking. So back to answer a very long-winded question to your answer to your question. We finally decided to go in-person instruction somewhere early summer. We were leaning toward that, and then about July, we finally decided, as late as that sounds, with August starting, we decided this is what we're going to do. We put the classes in play to be able to do that with the possibility of converting them online, but we finally decided let's go on and do it. And I want to make sure it's documented. One of the primary reason, based on discussions going back to March and then carrying through, was we continue to hear from returning students and incoming freshmen, they wanted in-person instruction. And so it was in response to that, because, frankly, not an easy decision, but one decision we could have made was just move fully online, which is what some universities did. And it eliminates a lot of the other protocols you have to put in play. But that's not what the students wanted, and that's not what their parents wanted their daughters and sons to be involved with. And our faculty like to teach students in person as well. So
I definitely think it's worked out for the best, and I think the low amount of cases we've had here is definitely a testament to the thought and effort that's gone into keeping everybody safe.
I appreciate that, Christian, because there has been a lot of effort, and what we wanted to do was, and we're hopeful we'd be able to really to pull this off. And I think anyone up through the president would tell you that we weren't sure even when we started this if we were going to be able to get to November 24th, because you can put in and think through what you're going to do and try to look at every possibility of what might happen, but we continue to learn how the transmission occurs. And so, and I'm talking about across the world, not just at Morehead State University. And so there was a lot of information we weren't sure about then. When we pulled the trigger in July to do this, it was still, we were very much still in the learning curve phase of this.
And when I was interviewing President Morgan, he mentioned the COVID task force. Can you just walk me through how kind of that came about and when?
Yeah, so the part we really haven't talked about was how do we manage possible situations on our campus. So clearly that was a very significant part of the discussion is what do we need to do. So So what we did is we put together, thinking about who needed to be involved with the potential for those cases, positive cases, focusing a lot on students, because we clearly develop and have developed protocols for employees, faculty, etc., staff, but thinking about students and who needed to be involved in that discussion. So we knew housing, student affairs, we needed our health professionals, mental health professionals on the campus. We needed someone from academic affairs because of the implications if a student has to miss class. We needed not only just our vice president of student affairs, but also our member who manages situations, our dean of students, with directly contacting with students. And so what we did is we put together we started off with a larger group, and we recognized that's not going to be functional, because there's going to have to be a lot of things done and continue to be done literally every day as we get these circumstances that pop up on the campus. And we knew that this was going to be a team that's going to be consistently and constantly managing these things. And so we had to kind of make it a bit smaller. So we moved to the group I just described. It was a much larger team at the beginning, and it involved some nursing staff and other academic affairs individuals. And we decided really what we need is we need a smaller group who can really serve as the group that manages all the processes and tasks that need to be done. And we enlarged that group from the perspective of providing additional nurses, nursing professionals, and then a staff member or two to assist with all the communication that's going out to students, etc. And so that's kind of the rapid response team that you're describing here, is that smaller group. And so then we put together a very extensive set of a flow chart of how we're going to manage each of these circumstances. And I think that, and we've made adjustments along the way. You know, we certainly try to think of everything. We didn't think of everything. And so the first couple of cases, we learned some things about how to manage those situations. And we continue to refine it even now. But you know, it's a massive amount of work that's going on behind the scenes, but everyone that's doing it understands how important it is. And so there's no complaining coming out of that group. It's just an acknowledgement of this is the circumstances. No one's to blame for COVID-19, and so we just have to manage it as best we can. And as you said, I think that the results show that the protocols we put in place, and I've got to say, strip away all the protocols, the fact that the students are willing to abide by what we ask them to do, and I'm continue to be impressed literally every day as I'm looking at students on campus and walking on campus when I go wherever I might be going on campus, and students even outside on the sidewalks as they're walking are wearing these masks. And you know, we weren't sure. We didn't know if we'd get compliance on that. And so it's a real credit to the students. It's, you know, a lot of work put into the protocols, but if the students don't comply, it won't matter what the protocols are. And so they've recognized, I think, not only the importance of, but also the significance in terms of keeping the semester going in the format that they want it to be, was really dependent on them paying attention and then following through on what we asked them to do, and they've done it.
And the COVID response unit, is that just for if a student does test positive, or are you guys also kind of like a consultation board?
Yes, both. So the primary functions of that group would be, number one, to serve as the first contact on the campus if we learn of a positive case, and you know, understand there's multiple circumstances that can happen that are affiliated with the positive case. It could be that a student is a direct contact and is asked to quarantine, and that quarantine period is typically just as long as the isolation period if you are positive. And so those circumstances, and then there are others where we have a presumed positive or a presumed direct contact, and we have protocols for those situations as well. But I'm I'm sorry, I forgot the question you asked me.
Just if the COVID response unit was specifically for.
Oh, yeah, so once we identify a student and we designated a particular residence hall to be where we would put those students, so for the protection, their protection and also for others, then we invoke both from the physical health perspective, nurses that stay in connection with those students even when they're isolated. Mental health perspective, so we have a mental health professional on campus who monitors, and this is a kind of the hidden issue with COVID-19 is all the mental anguish and stress that people are feeling, whether they are direct contact, a positive case, or otherwise. And so we're very concerned about that, and so we're in touch with them at least once, if not multiple times a day. We also have an academic affairs person who is reaching out to them to see if they need any assistance with classes. I mean, they're able to manage their courses by the faculty being so willing to work with the students. So when they get notified that a particular student is quarantined or isolated, they jump right in and start working with the student outside of the regular class period, and have not received one complaint from a faculty member about doing that. And you know, we've had a consistent number of cases. It's not been a high number, it's very consistent on our campus week to week. And so each time I get a notification of one of those cases, positive or quarantine, and I get an email that says, here's the email going out to the faculty members to tell them this student's situation. And then behind that is a faculty member having to engage with that student and work with them to keep them from falling behind. And so all that's going on behind the scenes. So mental health assessments, physical health assessments, academic affairs assessments, faculty member assessments, how are things going. So yeah, a big part of the rapid response team piece was ensuring that once a student is identified, we don't just kind of put them in the residence hall and say, okay, just do your classes, we'll see you in 14 days. Food services, I can keep going on all the different support that's there.
And sorry, I just completely forgot the question I was about to ask. And has the aid we've gotten from the state and federal government kind of helped y'all out any, or?
It absolutely has. We used that aid to prop up a little bit of our purchases of some of the classroom technology, for example. But and for some purchases of PPE, I'm not, you know, that's a big part of what we're doing here is as you walk into a classroom, there are wipes there, there's hand sanitizer there. Those that cost money, and so that's been very helpful to be able to provide support from the federal government and state in that regard. But a big piece of it also is the expenses and unexpected expenses and situations for students. And so a significant chunk of that money that was provided was directed specifically at students and their situations. So I know that we've been able to assist students with situations, whatever they might be, housing and otherwise, you know, subsistence kinds of things. But also, we were able to assist students in purchasing software that they needed for classrooms, or for for classes that they were taking that had to be moved online. And so where normally they'd be able to access that software in a computer lab on campus, we're able to give them, either provide it to them directly or give them a check to be able to let them purchase the software they need. So yeah, that money, those CARES funds have been very, very instrumental.
And with cases on the rise in Europe and in the United States, us hovering at about 100,000 infections a day, has that changed how you guys are looking at the virus or next semester at all?
Right now, what we have done is we've tried to take a little pressure off the campus by, we had implemented early on in learning about COVID-19 some protocols in our staffing of our offices, keeping offices open on the campus, we're taking a little pressure off the staffing by rotating shifts and having staff that could work remotely. And so we have implemented sort of the same process in the last, we've had it going on in offices much of the entire semester, certain offices, but other offices we have not really done that. And so we put that kind of back in play over the last week out of concern with what's happening in Rowan County, the state of Kentucky, etc. Trying to be good citizens and support. The truth is we haven't seen an outbreak on our campus. It's in the county is where we're seeing that happening. But we also recognize that our staff and students also go out in the county. So we're trying to take a little pressure off instead of having people stacked up in offices, and I'm exaggerating that, they're not stacked up obviously. We have social distancing and all kinds of different safety protocols in play in our offices on campus. So that's part of what we're doing. We're just monitoring very closely. The good thing about the way we set up the fall semester is in just less than 3 weeks, as you know, the semester ends, November 24th. And students will not be back on campus until January 19th when classes begin for the spring. So that 7-week break, we hope students and staff, there'll be, employees will have some time off as well, because they'll be very, very conscious of maintaining the appropriate protocols at home. But we're just monitoring and we're planning on offering as planned for the spring semester. We're really watching very closely.
And if you don't mind me asking, has COVID affected you or your family at all?
It has not, other than how it affects everyone, in the sense of not direct effect. So, the fact that I wake up every morning and as I'm getting my keys, I'm taking my temperature, says that something's different about things. The fact that I have this lanyard with my mask around attached to it, and that's part of my normal protocol, means things are different. But in terms of me directly, I've not had any members of my family, very thankful, that have either been direct contacts or have been a positive case. My family, my mother and father have comorbidities that are very concerning, and so it's affected me personally in that way that I've not had an opportunity to have a lot of walking to my parents' house, who happen to live in Lexington. Haven't been doing that since March, and so that's very different. And to see them in masks is different, but just thankfully no specific COVID-19 cases in my family and extended family.
And is there anything you'd like to add or talk about?
Just that I wanted to again reiterate how much I appreciate in the role I have, where I can see across the campus how Morehead State University community has responded so positively to this situation. As I mentioned earlier, we did not know when this started how faculty, staff, students would respond to this, and I've just been very impressed and appreciative of that, because as we know, it's not just the campus, but it's also a personal issue. So your last question you asked me is pertinent, because part of the reason I want people to respect the protocols is because I want to make sure I remain safe and healthy. And so I've been very pleased to see how the campus has continued to, throughout the semester. There are documented cases of kind of COVID weariness. You just get tired of the protocols, and we really haven't seen that. And I'm just going to hope that we are able to continue that in the spring and be able to deliver instruction as the students and faculty would like. So, and I'm just ready for this to be over.
I'm quite the same with that.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.